This is Dr. Carmen Hall, a very good friend. We were students. I'm way older than she is at BYU. And she is just fabulous. She's an amazing performer, amazing collaborator, amazing lecturer.
Oh, this makes you feel good.
Yeah. And I've watched her career all these years, and we're thrilled to have her. She worked with our students at the music camp last year. They loved it. You're in for a treat. So there you are. And we welcome you from Utah Tech and SUU, and we love doing this. So welcome to Carmen.
I just have to turn it back on, but welcome, it's good to see you. So today I'm talking about music theory and how it affects our performance decisions. So what is music theory?
I always tell my students it's the rules of the game.
The rules of the game. Yeah, I should have a whiteboard, but oh, there's a whiteboard, but it's far away. All right, what else? What else would you say? It's the rules of the game. What else?
It's the building blocks of music. How to
Building blocks
construct
of music.
How
How
to
to
do
construct. Okay, what else?
everything.
You all have an answer, I know. Yes.
I don't know if I have it concisely, but I would always try to have them have the idea that you can take this musical theory idea and put it in your toolbox of things to create with. You know, so
To compose with?
you know, yeah, to
So your tools
compose
to
with,
compose
right, yeah, or for improvisation. So you've got this toolbox of theory ideas that you can draw on,
Right.
like going to the 6 instead of the 1 at the end of a piece to extend it a little bit.
So toolbox and rules, yes, yes.
Letters to the alphabet. so you
Letters
can
to
read
your
it.
alphabet, like that. Yes, what were you
Well,
saying?
I've always had a kind of a bias against the word theory because
That's
theoretical is not practical. So,
Yeah,
but
that's
it
true.
has to be the
So
practical.
we call it music rules instead of,
Yeah, the information to understand what you're trying to learn.
yes. Did somebody else?
I was going to say it's the why and the how. I know for myself as a student, I grasp things a lot easier when I know the why and the how.
Yes,
So
yeah. And our students don't know that while we're teaching. Who else has an answer? Anyone else? Yes.
Well, like you create words with the alphabet. You know, if we know our musical alphabet, we can create music.
Right.
We have to know what we're doing. We can create. So, yeah.
Let me see if I can. Okay. So it's the language of music. It's all the rules. It's everything everybody said, right? It's just what music. So tell me on a page of music, what is not music theory, right? There's nothing on a page of music that is not music theory. So it's just the language of how we speak about music. So it's kind of like science or English. When you have a sentence, yes, we can say the sentence. We can play the page of music, but do we have the words to describe what's on that page? Or in science or in English, this is a run-on sentence in music. So it gives us labels for what we're talking about and what is in music, right? And it allows us to communicate about music. So people have written books about this, lots of books. So it's an important thing, right? And it opens up our windows of what we can see and what we know about. So anyway, when I went back to school, maybe I should get there yet. When I went back to get my doctor's degree, so I just finished my doctor's degree in 2021, so it's almost been 2 years. But when I went back, I thought I had to take music theory classes, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty good at music theory, so it's got to be I don't know what I don't know, which is so true. So I always tell my students, my teachers at the University of Utah, there was one, Dr. Rowan. He was actually on my committee, but when he was in college at USC, he went to study theory with his teacher twice a week. He took theory lessons twice a week with his teacher. Did you know that was a thing, right? And my students don't have any clue. They think they just do their little concepts of piano theory. And done, but there's someone in college that, like, there's people who, if you know Schenkerian analysis, there are people that call themselves Schenkerians, right? Or there's a music theorist, and he does that. Dr. Rohn's at the university, he's retired now, but he does that every day, day in, day out, studying still every day in his life, and that's, music theory can go, it's like science, right? So when I went back, I thought I knew what Sonata Form was. Well, it changes. I did not know this, but Hepkowski and Darcy, Warren Darcy, if you go on Wikipedia, it talks about sonata theory. And I believe it's 2008, they came up with the sonata theory, wrote a book about it. And I'll tell you a little bit about it later, but who knew? There's still, like, music theory is still changing into science, right? Does that help you see what music theory is? Kind of? I hope that opens up your eyes a little bit. It's so much more. It's a whole field, and you could add to it too. If you notice something, give it a name, write about it, put it on Wikipedia, write a book about it, right? You too can add to it. So it's kind of like giving a speech. So in speech, we know that you might say something when you learn to read. Right, at the end of the paragraph, we're supposed to take time. Do you remember this when you started to read at the end of your sentence? Your teacher said, take time at the end of your sentence. Take a breath at the end of the paragraph, right? And if you want to emphasize something, you could say it louder, or you could say it really soft, right? When you're talking and communicating with people. So the same thing, what if you hold out or stop on a sentence? It's the same thing when we are performing, understanding what is in music, right? So we're communicating with our audience, and it's the same type of thing when you're giving a speech. So learning and communicating. So when we go to the score with our students, they're depending on us to help them understand the score. So when you see what's on the score, this is probably a composer that's no longer living. And this is how they communicated with you what can be done with this piece, right? So last year, I got the opportunity to play with a violinist, and we played the works. So there were two college students that asked me to play. I had no idea what I was getting into. They just called probably like 6 months in advance, will you play this piece way out? And I said, sure. And I didn't know if they would show up at my door. I never heard anything else. You know how college students can be, right? And so they showed up, these two guys showed up at my door, and I'm like, okay, who am I accompanying? Who are you? And one was the composer, and one was the person who was premiering his work, right? So they came and sat. The composer, I had a chair for him, yes. He sat on the floor, and he sat with his phone and his computer, and he didn't say a word the whole time. So imagine this. What if Beethoven were on your floor? You could ask him anything, and how would it go? What would you ask, right? And so I'm just sitting there playing this music. Very difficult, by the way. This composer had not learned to give breaks. And he's like, I'm learning that. I guess this is like his second full concert, like of an hour and a half. He had written so much music, and it was really fabulous music. So we read through it the first time, and then the second rehearsal, like the following week, I'm like, this is such a great opportunity I have to ask him any questions I want about this score. So if Beethoven were in the room, I know all the questions. I mean, I have a million questions, right? What did you mean by this dot? Or if this dot's a little bigger, what did you mean by this dot? Or this line, you did this line, what did you mean by this line? Well, one of my questions for this composer was, you have written in some of the pedal marks. What do you mean if there's no pedal marked in? Did you mean you don't want pedal? Or if it's marked in, do you want pedal? So, what do you think he said? He says, this is where I have an opinion, and then you can do what you want on the other. Anyway, it was just interesting to have the composer right there on my floor, waiting for any questions. And he was still learning, I was learning, the violinist was fabulous and still learning, but it was a very interesting experience. So, search your score and ask your questions of yourself or of someone else. But that's the composer communicating to you. And if your students are composing, then you need to say, communicate all that you want in your score. That's what you're leaving to people, right? And then make decisions what you're going to do with those things. So the harmony, label your chords. I'm going to share with you some experiences that I had with some students this week. I mean, I've been preparing this for a long time, right? And then yesterday I was teaching a student. I'm like, this is the greatest thing. You can tell I love music theory, right? I'm like, this is what I live for, is a lesson like this. Thank you, I'm going to put it in my presentation. So we'll see if I get to it. And Nancy, what time do I finish? Do you know? She's not here, but look on your schedules and tell me, give me a heads up. 9:40, so we have 24 minutes. Okay. All right, so decide what you're going to do about the vocabulary, the harmony, label all your chords, and I put circles around my cadences. Vocabulary, lines, what do the lines mean? What do the dots mean? What do what is the tempo? And listen to other performances and then make your decisions. Those might be ongoing, but make sure you notice all those. And then communicate. So when you do a performance, I could have put for performance here. I took that off because when you have an audience, you're communicating what's on that score, what the composer left. You're communicating that to your audience. And I always tell my students, take care of your audience. Like, serve it to them on a platter. Don't make them guess. Am I supposed to be listening to the right hand, the left hand? Was there a double stem on that note? Or, don't make them guess. Hand it to them on a platter so they don't have to work. They're there just to relax and listen, right? So that's always my philosophy with that. All right, I'm going to share with you some musical examples. I'm starting with some very simple ones from the Joy First Year Piano. And I'll talk about the Joy First Year Piano later. I really like this book because it's graded very, very well. And then a Sonata by Clementi, Intermezzo by Brahms, and then, if we get to it, the Bach Prelude number 6. All right, so as you look at this piece, I want you to tell me what kinds of themes would you teach to your students? It's kind of a simple piece, right? Simple piece. What do you notice right off the bat? Just black keys? Yes, black keys. So, black keys, he chose, this is by Dennis Segay, who wrote the book, right? He chose this key for a reason, right? So, and in this book, I appreciate that it's in the book because a lot of times you'll get a transfer student that says, oh, I can't do black keys, or I can't do 6 flats, I can't do more than 2 flats. I'm like, it doesn't matter, right? They're all the same, they're all the same whole sets, half sets. They might just have more flats on the music. So I love that in the middle of this book, and I often skip to this and let them use this for a performance because it just takes that away, right? So always play flat. So he chose the key for a reason. This is a Moonlit Pagoda, so look at the title. So it's maybe a very quiet, calm piece in G flat. It's just a very mellow key in my mind. Like he didn't choose F sharp, right? He chose G flat. So that's number 1. What else would you notice?
Well, the title suggests an exotic, oriental, distant.
Yes, so maybe a
image.
pentatonic scale might be coming, right? Yes?
It's on black keys for sure.
Right, yes, yeah.
And that's an example of how you can take that and this idea of the pentatonic scale and let them go create their own piece because there are no wrong notes on a pentatonic scale. So that's,
Right.
you
and
can
it's
take that
great
theory
words.
idea and
Yes.
make it
So
creative.
I did that yesterday with the Bach Prelude number 6. The student, I said, keep the left hand chords and you can play, what would you add to the right hand? If you were to change it, what could you do keeping the left hand? So you could keep the left hand here, and it's all in G flat, right? So what if you did something else, have your student just do? What would you write if you were writing a book? Anything would go, and it's a great opportunity to improvise, right? Okay, what else would you see from the title? What else would you teach? The phrase mark, yes. So I always say a phrase tells you to do 3 things. That little line is invaluable. And if you start, so this is the Joy First Year Piano, right? So I make sure that in this book they're making all their correct habits. So a slur tells you, what does a slur tell you?
Legato.
Legato is one, yes. What else? Tells you shape. So start less. I should go from this way for you. Start less, get bigger, and end less. And the third one is where to lift. So you lift at the end of a phrase. Usually go, that wasn't a very good shaped phrase, well-shaped phrase, but usually go 2/3 of the way through. So it's usually not halfway when your peak is, right? So here, and away and lift off. My pedal didn't lift that time. To count one is always going to be bigger. Okay, nice. So phrases, what else would you teach in this piece?
I'd have students that would look at that and freak out when they see all those notes together at the same time. So, you know.
The clusters.
And that's exactly what I would talk about is they're just the clusters and then the groups of twos and threes.
Yes, yes, and you might even teach that first,
Like,
right?
yeah,
Go to the end.
I probably would,
Yeah, so group of
Yeah.
three with the slur and it's pianissimo
yeah.
and,
And then just keep doing it and then going down the registers.
yeah, and make rest that's super big, right?
Yeah.
So you can take away those spheres, yes, no big deal, right? Nice, so clusters, what else?
I think it helps if they understand patterns. When they can understand that a line to a line is a third interval, or a space to a space is a third interval, the clusters don't become very daunting. Because they see, they say, oh, it's a third. And instantly, that's where the music theory, like the practical application of music theory, comes into play.
Right, and so I called it a cluster, right? So
Mhm.
it's just a label that we put on, it's the
Yeah.
language of music that we're teaching them, right? So, yes, and the intervals, even these, go up a step, go up a step, go up a skip, and if their hands are in the key of G flat, then that's the step and skip, right? Skip a finger or step to the next finger. Yeah, okay, what else?
Pedals.
Pedal, thank you, yes, yes. So pedals marked, and pedal, this is what Dennis Gig is communicating with us. Again, he's probably not living, I don't know when he died, but he asked you to lift off there. I don't really like that, but that's what he said, so it's his piece, right? And then retardando, so make sure you know all the terms. Retardando and then moderately gently moving, right? So he was nice to add all of that. And I think this is the first time in this book that he adds pedal as well. So he writes press lift at the top and gives instructions. So you can have little tiny ones playing the pedal on this. So you need if you choose this piece, you need like a pedal box probably. Right?
When did the pedal bar notation begin? All
And
my
then we
early pieces
research
never
that.
had it.
Google that and tell us in a minute. I think composers have different marks for it too. Like Beethoven used it, right? And Beethoven was very specific when he wanted it, when he didn't want it.
Well, but this down lift line, it's not in any of my old editions. When did that
Oh, I
begin
don't
to
know.
be used in print?
You research that, I guess. Email all of us, please. Because there's lots of different ways to write pedal too, right? So, yeah. Yeah, so important that you mark, that you know. And I think what the composer in my house said, this is where I have the opinion. Use what you want on the rest. I really appreciate that. I'm like, I bet you Beethoven's thinking that same thing. Amen, amen. Right? So, okay, what else would you teach on this? Yes?
I would have them check out the fingering.
Oh, good, yes.
It's not everywhere, but it's some places.
Yeah, I didn't even
and
think about that, yeah.
Pay attention to that. I always do that.
Good, and I always tell my students, if you want to use a different fingering, you have to cross it out and put yours, and then I'll expect that from now on, that that's what you use. But just know someone's worked really hard at the fingering. If any of you know Bridget Johansson, she's done fingering for Marshall McDonald. And I know she's worked really hard on it, and then she'll ask a bunch of other opinions. Do you agree with what I recommended? And so somebody's worked hard on the fingering, they've considered it, and maybe have more experience than you. But if you want to change it, that's fine, just do it on purpose.
I would get my student to see, I'm in a G-flat 5-finger pattern. Is there a place where you change to a new 5-finger pattern? Where's your hand gonna go?
Uh-huh. with the clusters, is that what you're talking about?
No, with the, moving to the A flat 5-finger pattern.
With this, so, and then you reach to the E flat, right?
They could reach to it, or little ones might just want to do a new.
And do, oh, okay, and then, yeah, good, I like it, good.
I think that G flat at the end is something you could talk about, that I always called it the ending way, you know, the ending note. But it's tonic, so you could introduce that
The
note.
whole
I guess
thing.
it's tonic, I say tonic, and there isn't G flat, I know. So
Yeah,
anyway,
good.
you could do that and have them hear it, and then also have them choose a different note at the end, a different flat key, and see, what does that sound like? And does that sound like you're coming home? Well,
All right,
not really.
good, yeah.
So that G flat is coming home. So you could spend some time talking about tonic. And
Good, I
depending on
hadn't thought about that.
how much time you have.
Okay, I have two other things I'm thinking of.
Probably point out the difference on the second line in the left hand between the tie and the slur.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, so know the difference between a tie and a slur, super important. What about meter? What about time signature? So, and what about phrase length? Those are the things that I wanted to touch on. So the meter is triple, and triple, I mean, meter is how you would, I always say it's kind of how you would conduct it, right? And there's a bigger, so you can say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so it goes in 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that might help determine your tempo as well. Okay, but if you also look at phrase length, how many's in the first one? 1, 2, 3, 4. So number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then he does groups of 2. 2. And the second one, you probably want to do something with it. Do you want to make it bigger or make it as an echo, which is already quite a piece. So, and then 2, 3, 4. And then he does a group of 2, and a group of 2, and then a group of 4. So I would also talk about phrase length, and he's marked those. So be very sensitive to that. Let's see if I got all my things. Oh, the other thing is the skeleton of this piece. I like to talk about skeletons because if you can figure out, and that's just my term, this is not a theoretical term, right? If you take it down to one of the very basic notes of this piece, if you took everything away, so this goes back to Schenkerian analysis. Does anybody know Schenkerian analysis? Probably better than me, but anyway, Steve Rowan's from the University of Utah, so I think he considers himself a Schenkerian, right? So I took his class, and it's very frustrating at first when you do Schenkerian analysis, and I am not good at it. And he knows that, right? But I'm like, Schenkerian analysis changed how I teach, how I learn, how I memorize, how I perform. And it just changed how I look at things. So this B flat is important, and B flat, da-da-da-tom, and you only use B flat once. So the B flat, he repeats the B flat, A flat, there's 3 of them, and then the ending note is G flat. So if you are just looking at the skeleton of this piece, is B flat, do you see where that is? Does everybody see where that is?
Yeah.
I do have a pointer in my bag, I believe. So, and then the A flat and the G flat. Where else do you see those 3 notes?
In the cluster.
Where?
In the cluster.
In the cluster, yes. Where else? The first measure? Right? So you see it on a small level and also on a larger level. Do you all see where I'm saying the B flat is? So here, B flat, and then he does it again, and then the next sections, and then back to go. So if they understand that, then how would you shape this whole piece? If you play this musically, can they play that musically? And then can you play the whole piece with that? That means maybe bigger, A flat, and then we're resolving to G flat. each time I play this for you, I played it a little faster, right? Because we're thinking of different things that draw the whole piece together. So if you think about the skeleton of each of your pieces, it makes it, I don't know, that's what I was fascinated by with music theory way back in high school, junior high, when my teacher would point out certain lines, and I've always been in search of certain lines that are in music that you can actually play. Okay, we've spent how long on one piece, right? So much that you can learn from that one piece. All right, white sails. We're not going to spend as much time on this, but you notice, let's just toss out, what do you notice in this piece?
Time signature.
Time signature, 5/4, right? And usually students that play this, I guess if you teach it right, they're going to appreciate it and love it. But 5/4, I never liked 5/4 growing up. But if you see, this has slurs. So you're going to shape it according to the slur. Okay, so what else would you teach? Phrasing, meter, time signature is the biggest deal. So this one, let's see. So C. Let's see what I wrote. C, D, okay, so what was the skeleton of this? The first measure you have a C, second measure you have a D, third measure you have D again, and then E, which then is probably used for the descending D in the next two measures. The next two measures you have a C. So some of these phrases are overlapping. So do you see the skeleton of this piece is C, D, E, E, D, C, and we can continue with that. So on the third line, it starts with a C. Fourth line, D. The next measure starts with a D. The next measure starts with an E. The next measure starts with a D. D and D. And then the ending, E, D, C. So there's a compositional device. What's he using? I would say this is almost a compositional device because you can see it on the bigger level. And where else does he use C, D, E? First measure, right? Yeah, so this, and then he uses that. So, and then he ends the piece with da 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 da. So that little thing, could they play that musically? Then does that affect how they play the whole piece? So if you see it on a bigger level and a smaller level as well.
Carmen, is that what Schenkerian analysis is? Looking at the skeleton, at least part of Schenkerian?
I'd say it simplified for me, yes.
Okay.
So you can take a whole big piece down to, and there's so much more to it, but in a nutshell, I think for me that's what it does, yes.
Who wrote this one?
It's probably Dennis DeGay.
Same, okay.
He doesn't label it, but it's out of that same book. You'll see I like that book.
Okay.
Every time I go away, I'm like, I'm so sick of these pieces. I'm not really sick of them because they're musical, right? Every child can play these musically, and that's why I like them too. But there's many, many other books that you can use. Don't be stuck on this. All right, so maybe in the interest of time, let's go on. So the sonata. So Sclementi, Opus 36, number 3. I guess we could talk about quickly this one. So this one, I would say, introduction, and then so So make sure they understand. Here's the introduction. We're going to go to the circus. We're at the circus. Okay, so in this piece, there's the skeleton of this also. And I would also emphasize, make sure when you are talking music theory that you always play the piece. Play it, it changes everything, right? So if you look at this, you'll see things looked at, and then if you play it, you notice B is an important note, C is an important note, C, B, B, A. Starts again, B, C, D, C. So it really comes down to B, C, C, B, A, B, C. And if a student can play that musically, then they can apply that to the whole piece, right? The meter here is quadruple, phrases, question, answer. Seconds are important in this piece. On the left hand, what do you notice in the left hand? That's the whole piece right there, right? So he's using a 5/7 chord, so a cadence, right? So could your student then make up their own right hand using the left hand? Because I think sometimes we'll say, just use your cadence and make up something, and then they think they need more. Well, this composer didn't do anything else. And if you notice in Moonlit Pagoda, he didn't even go anywhere. He just did that and this, right? So you can do a whole piece with one chord. We don't have to change, when we're composing, you don't have to change chords every beat. All right, so I think this is a great example of that. All right, Clementi. All right, so when I'm talking about form, so obviously in the sonatina you want to talk about form, sonata form, right? And it's just so easy in a sonatina because it's not spread out over 5 or 6, 10 pages. It's in 2 pages, so this is a perfect opportunity to share about sonata form. So I don't usually say that right out loud. I analyzed this sonata with somebody this week, and I just said, mark your sections, and you kind of guide them how big or small you want the sections, right? Where are the good starting places? So, and they might pull in there, but say, oh, keep going. Thinking ahead, bigger. So this is the exposition, right? First theme. Sonata theory, I told you sonata theory that came out in 2008, Tepikoski and Warren Darcy. You can find it on Wikipedia, right? So here, they have found in lots of sonatas, and most, I don't know if I've even come across one that doesn't have this one, but a medial caesura is what they called it, which is a middle stopping point, right? A medial caesura, and it's characterized by hammer strokes. So, that's the stopping point, and that happens in almost every sonata. I would not do a diminuendo there because that's part of nearly everyone. He's about to leave the key of C, right? Because there's a transition coming. So don't end it big. I think he's just saying, remember this chord, it's a cool chord, we'll come back to it later. Such a great transition to the second theme, which is usually more lyrical. So here we are in the Okay, and then I would mark that cadence, right? So that, just say it's a stopping point, a caesura is a stop. So you can just call that a stop. And then it makes such a wonderful change to the dolce second theme. Okay, then let's go on to development. You might have sequence. And we're back to the right key. So you know that's to use the 5 to a 1. I would mark that cadence and then point out that we're in the key of C. How many of your students have played that? So he has a fake recapitulation in that one. It's in the wrong key. So make sure. I always like to use that example. Like he faked you out. The recapitulation is actually the second theme of that one. So go take a look at it. But because we use it so often, but it's a great example of how not to do sonata form. And that's probably like one of the best reasons to learn theory. I always tell my students, like, study, study, study. Like when they're in high school, AP Music Theory, and they're learning all the voice leading rules. I think I have a sophomore, and I taught her like 2 voice leading rules so she could play a cadence correctly. I'm like, oh, there's only like 20 more rules that you need to learn later. And she's like, what? This is what it's all about? This is how it's happened? And I'm like, this is how music really is. And she was so excited. I'm like, oh, you're feeling like I am about it. I just wanted to discover all this stuff. It's so great. And when you actually see what composers learn, and then once you learn all that, you can break the rules. And she's like, do people break the rules?
All the time. But you have to know
I'm like,
them.
sit in
Then you
church
break
when you're
them.
bored in church and you look through the hymn book and you find all the broken rules. Can you do that in the hymn book? Like if you find some, like, if you're bored, that's what you can do, right? Anyway, so it's wonderful, yes. But learn all the rules, make sure you can do them perfectly. And Bach and Mozart, all them, and Gerald did it all of them. They learned all the rules and then.
I admit it, I do. I break all the rules.
All right, so this one, I know we have to be done, but I just wanted to show you this. It would be so much easier if I could read it online. I wish I could show you this. Can you see all my marks in this? I had to put a clean one. I have a clean one in here too, but this I just wanted to point out to this descending line. Could you follow along? And I'm talking faster now because we have to be done, right?
You're talking softly and playing loud.
Okay. So I just wanted you to see that there's this descending line. This, he actually goes to that, and this, that's split between 2 hands, but that's one voice that does the roll up. And then he continues the descending line. So if you can see the descending line. Stops on G and then gets to a C finally, right? And then he goes, what goes down must go up, what up goes up must come down, right? So then his next section, he does that. But second and D, you can't see it that great up there, but. So I always want my students to mark the cadences. And this E, that is the 5 to 1. That's his 5. Because he doesn't give it to you there. Hold on to that E in your head. Here's his 5/7, but there's no E in that, which I are marking your cadences, which students need to know where their cadences are, right? Because it makes a difference ending your piece, ending your phrase, ending your section. In this case, they need to know in the middle of the page that E is very important. That was the beginning of his end. And he ends it with the majors, right? All right. And then this is what we talked, oh, that's it. That's all my notes. And then this was our prelude again that we analyzed in our, so we put, there's much to talk about in this and we won't go into it, but I put, we marked all her cadences. And then we figured out that the first section is pretty static. I think he does a modulation. The second page, this first page is very, very harmonically dense. The second page, not so harmonically dense. So I think when you're learning a piece also, it's important to say, a composer, except the one that came to my house, doesn't just, they can't do intense for the whole piece, right? They're going to do intense, and maybe your piece is even 14 pages long, but it's, maybe you can have a recapitulation or the A section comes back because that's what we like and that's what we know. So important, lots of important things to give to students when you're talking about music theory and their pieces. I hope that you have an appreciation a little bit more now that we've talked a little bit about it. So anyway, thank you.